Hello and welcome to you all, and thank you for joining our FoodBytes webinar today. My name is Victoria and I'm from the FoodBytes team, and I'm thrilled to be hosting this session with you all. We're thrilled to be running our 6th webinar today in an effort to continue to support our global ecosystem of emerging and established companies. Over the last month, we've hosted 5 webinars with over 1,000 attendees from more than 30 countries and addressed topics like the investment landscape, shifting consumer behaviour, and pivoting models to prepare for the new economy. Today's topic focuses on rethinking produce supply chains. We're bringing together produce leaders from our network to explore how supply chains are being transformed near term in the face of massive demand shifts, as well as forward-thinking changes to strengthen them in the future. Before I introduce you to our speakers, Sonia Sheikha, our Insights Analyst, has a note to share for companies new to our network today.
Thanks, Victoria, and welcome to the companies joining us for the first time. Through FoodBytes, we aim to connect promising entrepreneurs with the greater food and ag community that we've built over the past several years. Initiatives like these webinars are intended to share insights and create valuable connections that can help move the industry forward, especially during challenging times. You can get further involved through 2 programs, FoodBytes Pitch and FoodBytes Pilot. FoodBytes Pitch gives startups access to leading industry mentors, investors, and corporates, culminating in a final pitch competition. And Pilot pairs a corporate and startup together over 6 to 9 months to collaborate on a specific goal or industry challenge. Investors and corporates interested in partnerships can reach out to us at foodbytes@rabobank.com. And if you're a startup interested in our programs, please fill out the interest form on our website at foodbytesworld.com.
It gives me great pleasure to welcome our speakers, which include produce leaders in the FoodBytes network from the farm gate to the consumer plate. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Ryan Craney of Craney Farms.
Well, thank you. Welcome, everyone. I'm a potato grower here in southern Idaho, and when this all Corona went down, we started to get word that our customers, that their customers in the food service channel especially were starting to close up shop. And so 60% of potatoes in Idaho go to the food service channel. And so when the restaurants shut down across the U.S. and then across the world, we started to see the freezers start to fill up with the processors. And then on the fresh side, we saw shipments going, way down. So 60% of our market, disappeared. So then, as people shifted to home to cook more at home, we started to see a little bit of demand pick up in the retail side, but we ran into some real logistical issues and supply chain issues. Normally, like where we own part of the fresh pack shed that ships normally to food service. That's about 95% of our product goes to food service, and about 5% goes to retail. So now all of a sudden we're trying to flip that exactly opposite, and our shed's not set up internally to accommodate that. Normally food service goes out in big, large boxes, 50 pounds, maybe even 1-ton totes, and retail's in 5 to 10 pound bags. So now we were trying to run our little bagger. We have this old bagger that handles just a small side stream. We're running our bagger 24/7, trying to accommodate, the demand for retail. We're trying to shove large potatoes into small bags, and it just become really a nightmare. So we ordered a new machine, but we're still 6 weeks out to getting our new bagger machine to give us increased capacity. But that's kind of what we saw. Everybody kind of in the area, they began to kind of fight over the same markets. That would be what's left in the dehydrated market. And both the processors and all the fresh packers, even the seed growers, trying to go in there. So we had some product that we couldn't get sold, and we knew that we wouldn't be able to get sold. And so we decided to do the potato giveaway, which for some strange reason it garnered national attention and actually international attention all over the world. Because I've had people contact me from all over the world over our potato giveaway. But we found that giving away potatoes was actually more difficult than what it seems like, especially in mass quantities. And so we had thousands of people come to the farm to take potatoes, everything from one, small bags to food banks who were coming with pickup trucks and trailer loads, it was difficult to do. A lot of them would call and say, "Hey, can you wash and pack these for us?" Well, they're free, and so we couldn't put the extra additional costs into doing that. Anything that went to like government order or to a lot of food banks wanted their product washed and graded, which made it very difficult to do. We found that it was very difficult to move a high volume of product. We gave away just a small percentage of our potatoes, and it was pretty tedious, receiving thousands of phone calls in our office to give that away. With all the attention, we've been able to make a lot of new connections. I've had individuals and people reach out to me from all over the United States and all over the world of, selling direct to consumers, direct to groceries, or direct to restaurants even. But they all have the same logistical issues and supply chain issues of trying to get the product there in small quantities in an efficient, economical way. I've had somebody reach out from China about potentially exporting potatoes into China in the millions of pounds of frozen French fries. So I've been able to pass that along to our customer, and hopefully they'll be able to make some good of that. Facebook's contacted me, and they're working on an initiative to remove efficiency out of the supply chain from farmers to direct to consumers. And so we've been collaborating a little bit with them on that. And then just like everyone, it's impossible to forecast. Going forward, farms are struggling trying to decide how much to plant. If you overplant, we could have possible farm failure as prices will be so low. But if we underplant, then we're going to have food shortages. Nobody's going to be happy in any of those scenarios. So we ended up cutting our acreage by 20% for this coming year of potatoes.
Thank you, Ryan, and thank you for sharing that insight into the shift from food service to retail. I'm sure we will deep dive on that a little bit more in the Q&A section. So handing over to Tracy Harden from Imperfect Foods.
Hi, everybody. What a pleasure it is to be here with fellow industry professionals. This is certainly a time where we can benefit from leaning into each other to share our various perspectives, what it takes to bring fresh produce to our people. So I thought I would give you 3 updates on Imperfect Foods. 1, current state of our business in response to this pandemic, pain points associated with an incredible shift in demand, and our thought process of an imperfect vision for recalibrated supply chains. So many of you probably know at Imperfect Foods, our goal has always been to eliminate food waste and support farmers and food purveyors when it comes to excess product, and our sourcing model has not changed during this pandemic. We already know our food system currently produces far more food than our country can eat every year, and our suppliers are confident in their ability to continue feeding everyone despite these challenges. Our offerings do change from week to week, but we are in daily talks with our farmers and our partners to ensure we have a continuous supply of core products. Due to the closure of many food service businesses and restaurants, we are certainly seeing a shift in massive waste across the country as farmers and food producers have been forced to discard excess product. Through our incredibly strong network of farmers and suppliers, we've been able to grow our partner base and quickly identify products that could have normally slipped through the cracks and redirect them to our customers. As a result, our produce supplier network has actually increased by 27%, which is incredible. These new growers and suppliers are across the board in regards to size and scale, but these are products that go primarily to food service, as Ryan just mentioned. For example, in San Francisco, we offer 3-pound bags of pizza cut broccoli florets. When one of our suppliers was stuck, they had already catered to the order of their partner's needs. Additionally, a gluten-free bread company called Young Cobras lost their business as food service customers cut bread orders. We stepped in to purchase retail packs. This allowed them to use their huge stock of flour and offer our customers another option in our weekly boxes. Our growers have been really transparent with us. They are sharing their struggles as food service accounts dry up and shopping patterns move towards pantry items and away from specialties, such as mushrooms. We recently even received a thank you from one of our mushroom growers that we partner with. In fact, the total number of pounds in the millions we have rescued and shared with our consumers has grown by 80%. And we've seen more than 40% growth in our active user base since the start of 2020. And considering this is all in response in a relatively short period of time, we have, as Ryan has laid out, our share of challenges, meeting demand in flux while servicing customers to our standards, finding creative solutions, investing in our fulfillment centers to include additional pack lines, storage capacity, technology. In March, we added 250 more staff members. In April, approximately 350 and still counting. We've been steadily ramping up our operations across the country for the last year, and the surge we're seeing as a result of this pandemic forced us to implement new processes much faster than planned. All while the safety of our team and customers remain our top priority, we will first and foremost continue to take every necessary precaution at our facilities. This means having to put a lot of customers on the wait list. Our decision to do this was driven by our need to carefully account for our team's safety and our commitment to ensure all customers have the best possible experience once they can sign up. Also, our food donations, they do fluctuate month to month, but we are not seeing a dip because of COVID. We've donated as a company over 4.6 million pounds of food to nonprofits and food banks across the country, but this year alone, year to date, it's up at 700,000 pounds of food. We're donating to Feeding America to support their food access work in time. We're matching customer donations up $25,000. We are also distributing funds through our small grant program, Feeding Change Fund, for emergency food relief. And we've partnered with some giant retailers like the Kroger Company. Through their Zero Hunger, Zero Waste Foundations, we are waiving the delivery fee for seniors who are eligible for our reduced cost box program. In fact, our reduced box program has grown staggering 177%. Huge. Lastly, I thought we would share how we at Imperfect Foods are visioning for recalibrated supply chains and greater industry collaboration. We have agreed that Imperfect Foods will pledge to pursue and promote responsible consumption and production. To pursue this goal, we further commit to reducing waste to landfill. This includes waste generated from our offices, warehouses, shipping, and product and packaging. Sourcing intentionally, what does that mean? This includes grocery and produce sourcing materials in our office, marketing, etc. We aim to use energy responsibly, including our office, distribution, employee commuting, and really defining what it means truly intentionally source, moving beyond just imperfection, codifying existing practices, sharing them internally and externally. What do we want to change together? What do we want to add? What do we want to eliminate? It's more than sustainability.
Thank you, and that's amazing to see that business model shift over the last couple of months to service that demand in flux. So again, I'm sure we will dive into that a little bit more shortly. Over to Ilanit from Dole Packaged Foods.
Hello to you all. It's 6 a.m. in the morning here in Singapore. So we're on a different timing than most of the crowd out there. So thank you for the invitation and for this opportunity to speak and to rethink together. Just to put a bit of a context, I lead venturing at Dole, Dole Packaged Food. Dole Packaged Food is a sister company to Dole Fresh produced, which you're all familiar, but you're also very familiar with our products like fruit cups and smoothie kits and cans and so on. So we're vertically integrated, and so we own our farms, and which is part of our supply chain. And roughly a year ago, when I joined the company, I joined as part of a new team with a new CEO, Pierluigi Sigismondi, and an exceptional leader. Joined the company and brought the new team to transform this business with a massive passion and commitment for more nutrition, for more people, better products, better industry, and commitment for waste elimination. So a lot of the new things is happening around those topics here. There are essentially three topics that I would like to speak about. One has to do with rethinking our supply chain, and I don't think I have answers here. I do have a big key point, which is we do need to rethink what we have done in the past is not valid anymore. And I think the work that Tracy is doing with Imperfect Food is just inspiring. And I wish there would be more of that. But it's one of the models that we should look at. And then there is so that's the first topic that I would like to us to talk about. The second is about waste and our activity around waste, and the third has to do with supply chain digitization, which is a big topic and big pain point. It is not an easy thing to do. So starting with the first one, starting with rethinking our supply chain. If I go back to the origin of COVID-19, then this is essentially an health crisis which is directly linked to food. I think it's one of the rare cases when we see food, health, planet all together. After these seeds of changes have been planted for a while and been exploded with this pandemic, with the COVID-19, and I think it brings us back to the thought: what is really the connection that we need to have between food, between health, between the health of ourselves, and the health of the planet? And when we think about it, we need also to rethink what is the best or the ideal supply chain, because our supply chain, the just-in-time supply chain that has been prevalent, has been efficient, which has been successful so far. If you take this supply chain and break it down to small fragments, then we see that there are lots of questions that we need to ask ourselves, like what's happening with farmers' labor work and with their with our affordability of food. And then if you go further down the supply chain, is it really logic that a food can travel or should travel 3 weeks just to get to our plate? This is something that we would like to continue. Moving on also to consumers and looking at a new type of consumers, and I'm talking about the Gen Zennials, like Gen Z and millennials, which are now 50% of US population, and they have a whole list of new values. They're digital savvy, they're environmental activists, they're sensitive to social issues. Do the current supply chain really adapt to their needs, to their values? And also we should look at new rising models. I mentioned Imperfect Food, but also look at the Italian model, which is a very old model, very established model in the Italian culture. I lived there for 6 years, and you see that people are just buying fresh produce near their homes on almost on a daily basis, and everything is produced actually in there within a few miles radius. Is that a sustainable supply chain? I'm not sure, but this is a model which is an interesting model to look at. And the last model I would like also to talk about is the model of Singapore, which is the Singapore government has issued a program which is called 30 by 30, which means 30% of the nation's food should be produced locally by 2030, which now for today, Singapore, an island with 6 million people, is producing only 10% of its food, which means a very fragile supply chain, very fragile when it comes to food security, also to nation security. So I don't have answers, but I do have this big or many thoughts what the new supply chain should look at, and I think that in the context of the transformation that we are into, we have this obligation to look at new models and consider them. Second topic that I would like to highlight has to do with waste. We understand the numbers. We know the numbers are staggering, especially now. At Dole, we were mapping our food waste, mostly the food waste in our factories. I was interested to understand a part of the numbers that are out there, what really we waste in our supply chain, starting from the farm to the exit door of the factory. And there's lots of learnings over there. I would say that 30 to 50% of the fruits that we're working with, and this is like pineapple, bananas, mango, papayas, guavas, watermelon, many fruits. During the processing stage, 30 to 50% of the fruit is lost. And it has to do with the flesh, it has to do with the peel, it has to do with the seed. So, and lots of nutrients and lots of good stuff are over there. So one of our biggest initiatives is to look at this waste and thinking very carefully how to utilize that, and thinking with external partners. So I do invite startups to work with us around this topic. And the third point that I wanted to discuss, and I hope I'll do this quick enough, is the topic of supply chain digitization. Just a second. I wrote a list here of supply chain technologies, just a highlight of a long list of potential technologies.
So thank you for providing that insight. I know that supply chain challenges with Dole are certainly it'll be interesting to see what comes out of that. So thank you for sharing. I'm going to hand over to Roland Fumasi from Rabobank's Rabo Research Food and Agribusiness Division.
Thanks, Victoria, and thanks everybody for joining us today. When I try to think forward about what produce supply chains might look like, I mean, we kind of have to start with some of the challenges and opportunities that have come to the forefront since the COVID-19 outbreak. And I say come to the forefront because the challenges and opportunities I'm going to talk about, they're not brand new. There's just a heightened awareness of some of the challenges out there and a heightened awareness of some of the opportunities. And I want to be clear about that. So really two things have been discussed quite a bit over the last 2 months. The first one is a recognition that maybe we need shorter supply chains in fresh produce. And a lot of that argument centers around some of the logistical bottlenecks we've had. You've heard about some of them today. But that could be anything from port bottlenecks for global supply chains to shifting logistics even domestically. When you try to shift supply from food service over to retail and get logistics to line up, that can be a challenge. So on one hand, maybe supply chains need to be shorter so that they are more resistant to logistical challenges. Obviously, shorter supply chains have other advantages. We know consumers have in recent years been going in for much more local produced type products. That seems to strike a positive chord. You have potential for greater shelf life if you have shorter supply chains. You have less miles, which potentially is more environmentally friendly. I say potentially because the equation's a little more complicated than that, which I can talk about more in the question and answer period. So you have benefits there. And then on the other hand, one of the other things we certainly recognize is that supply chains need to have more flexibility and they need to have more diversity in terms of downstream customers, right? So imagine a very localized supply chain in fresh produce. Maybe it's a grower, packer, shipper. Maybe it's a group of small growers who are focused on very localized independent restaurants. Well, that's an example of a very short supply chain that in these times is as stressed as any supply chain out there because they had a very focused downstream marketing mix, downstream customer mix. So on one hand, you have the potential desire for shorter supply chains because of logistical issues. On the other hand, COVID-19 has really shown us that we need more flexible and more diverse supply chain. And those two things are kind of at odds with each other if you think about it, right? More diversity and more scale in the supply chain, I think tends to lead to more flexibility in the supply chain. So I think those are two competing ideas that, well, they're partially competing, right? Our job then as an industry is to find that middle ground. And I think when you think about it, now keep in mind, there's very good reasons why in some cases we have longer supply chains, right? The simplest example would be seasonality or comparative advantage between one growing region of the country or the world versus another growing region, right? Just different capabilities in the types of crops. But maybe where we end up is somewhere in the middle, where supply chains maybe shy away from either extreme, and we find a good middle ground. So I think of the U.S. domestically, and I think about more regionally focused supply chains, where you have a little more diversification on the supply side and the customer side than you would with a hyper-local supply chain, right? So you kind of get some of the benefits of both kind of as you go to the middle ground, and I think it helps mitigate some of the risk. So that may be where we're headed. That's nothing new. Some produce companies have already recognized the importance of having more regional supply chains because of the benefits they bring. I'll just end on one more topic, and that is this move to the digital channel. Certainly that's been something that's been happening really strongly over the last, say, 5 years. And we think that certainly some of this is going to be sticky. People are going to buy more food online even after this is over. And I want to remind the value chain participants that particularly in the upstream value chain, say at the farm level, one of the things that I think is sorely lacking out there is our digital assets. In this online channel, there is no excuse for the entire supply chain not to supply the information, the detailed information that the consumer wants all the way back to the farm. So I think in this new environment, it's really time for the value chain, including farmers, to begin to get your digital assets in order so that your products then can be promoted and that consumers can really hear the story all the way back up the value chain, because in the online channel, there's an unlimited space for information. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. And again, thank you for addressing that fundamental shift required, and I guess the challenge that you've addressed around that shorter supply chain versus the flexibility and diversity still needed. All right, handing over to you, Nina.
Sure, yes. Thank you all. A fantastic session so far. We've a lot of questions coming in on a few different areas, so we'll try where we can to consolidate them. This one was directed towards Ryan, but we also sort of had a general question to the group around packaging. So Ryan, the question is, will you be modifying your packaging systems as a farmer, and sort of outlining the challenges that you shared, switching from food service to retail? Will you be making your packaging systems more modular or adaptable in the future? That's a question for Ryan. And then if we think about it more broadly, what kind of packaging trends do you anticipate seeing sort of proliferated as a result of this in produce supply chains? So I think let's start with Ryan, and then I know Roland, you may have some thoughts as well as Ilanit, because we got particular questions around packaging in the Australia market. We're really glad to have a bunch of folks dialing in from down under. So Ryan, I'll hand it over to you and then move through to Roland.
I guess the answer is yes, we will be modifying our systems to accommodate, the new demand. Like the question really becomes is how long is this going to last? Is this long lasting, or is it just going to return somewhat more back to normal? And so, spending a lot of money in infrastructure and it could be a challenge. So, but we have new equipment on order. Hopefully within a couple months we'll have that installed, which will help us be able to meet those demands a little better. So yes.
Yeah, so I would just say around packaging, I mean, look, leading up to all this, there was already this kind of conflicting desires out there on the consumer side, and that is, on one hand, We know that there's a desire globally to reduce packaging for environmental reasons, etc. On the other hand, we know that consumers are wanting more and more convenience. Well, typically in fresh produce, when you drive convenience, you drive packaging intensity, right? Think of bulk produce at retail that has less packaging versus a clamshell produce or a packaged salad. So those things are already challenging to reconcile. Now enter COVID-19, where people are reportedly feeling much more comfortable, right, grabbing something that's packaged because perhaps somebody else didn't touch it. So there's that added kind of influence now. So I don't have the answers to it, but those are kind of the two conflicting forces that push this packaging thing in kind of two different directions. But one thing's for sure is as a value chain, particular suppliers are going to need to think about having more flexibility to flip a switch and be able to serve one channel versus another channel or a combination of the two.
Roland, you are so correct when there is a conflict in what consumers are choosing to spend and choosing convenience over reducing their use of plastic. We at Imperfect are trying to figure out how to partner, either creating our own packaging system that uses more sustainable materials, because right now the reality is they're expensive and no one's really taking the lead, and that's what we need to happen. We need somebody, some producer, some retailer to take the lead and help drive these packaging costs down.
Wow. But this is a question that we can start with you, Ilanit, around the circular economy. So how are you thinking about how the new economy post-COVID, and as we acclimate to the challenges we've been going through here today, how do you see this affecting the circular economy? Will the waste streams that we've been thinking about still exist as we potentially move to more localized food chains and localized processing, as Roland was speaking about? Ellen, it would be great to get your thoughts on that, and potentially Roland as well.
So I don't think we're even near to the end of waste, that everything will be circulated in an economic cycle, where we just starting with this as a trend. So if supply chains will be more regional, local, there will be still some kind of waste, and it will be still a lot. If we manage to minimize it to a certain degree, then we did our effort, then lovely. But that's not. I think that it's an inspiration and maybe a target to the future, but we're far from being there. As for now, what we are seeing is that waste elimination is still a big challenge, and it's a big challenge in each part of the supply chain, of the value chain of the food industry, both the produce and the packaged food industry, and there's a lot to do. What we are trying to do, as we have identified our waste in the fields, in the farms, and our waste in the factory, we also have identified what could be done with this type of waste. So we will be able, hopefully, also to profit for this and create our own circular economy model within Dole. Just to name a few potential areas where we could use our waste. So definitely we could use ugly fruits or imperfect fruits for the creation of products, but we can also use the agri waste, the waste that is in the field, whether it's for packaging, use the fiber for packaging, or whether it's to extract nutrients from the fibers. The roots of pineapples contain very high nutritious bromelain, which is a fantastic nutrient. And as you move on also to food waste within the factory, then there is the peels of the fruits, which can be used again for extracting nutrients. The cosmetic industry is doing a lot with this type of ingredients, or with this type of nutrients. Think of papaya seeds, the same. There's a lot to be done. And if you think about, so we have waste, and then we have other different areas that we can valorize waste and upcycle it, then you think also maybe the manufacturing planogram should be a bit different. Maybe we can see new type of micro factories next to our factories, micro factories maybe in the fields where we could recycle and upcycle agri-food waste and in the field and make it more valuable. And here's the circular economy model comes to life.
So around food that is in danger of going to waste, maybe Roland and or Ryan, with your perspective, I guess Tracy too. Oops, one second, I just lost the question because it jumped up. Sorry, what are the current gaps that you see and opportunities in processing? Are we currently hitting capacity levels? I.e., like, is there opportunity for us to be preserving and freezing food that would have gone to waste? Can you talk a little bit about that, going off of what Ilanit was just talking about in terms of circular economy?
Well, it depends on the particular crop, right? So, for example, in what's going on right now, the challenges we're facing, one of the specific sectors that is really being hit hard is the leafy green sector. So think about that product. We don't eat frozen lettuce. So that's a challenge for some particular crops more so than others. But even in crops that we can freeze and can process, right, we would have to, the short answer on the processing capacity is if we took all the crop that wasn't going to food service and tried to send all that crop to processors, no, this has happened too fast to have the capacity. But remember that even if we did have that capacity, that creates a significant overhang of supply. And we're at risk of that right now in processed crops, right? I mean, Ryan was talking about frozen potatoes. That's an example of a product that is typically frozen and can be frozen. Well, as we see demand because of food service get crushed when it comes to frozen potatoes, we continue to run a risk of having this supply hangover, if you will. So storable products can cause a lot of damage to markets in terms of price down the road. So while highly perishable products tend to feel more pain in the short run because we can't store them, we can't process them, that pain is over faster because we don't have to worry about an inventory hangover that we have to worry about with processed products. So I don't know if that really answers the question. I guess my point is it's much more complicated than just saving it for later. That can cause a lot of economic damages as well.
Great. And one more question that we were getting a lot of questions on when you were speaking, Roland, in particular. So I'll just pop over to that now. It's for both you and Ryan. Is sort of this idea of farmers getting their digital assets in order. You spoke about that in your last point, and there's some clarification that the audience would like on what exactly you mean when you talk about sort of those digital assets upstream. And Ryan, folks on the line would love to hear from you on what that means for you in terms of digitizing your work and your supply chain. We'll start with Roland and then hand it back to Ryan.
Yeah, what I mean by digital assets could be anything from a story, information in written form that can be used digitally, but ultimately in today's age, thinking video, where when the consumer, if they're shopping online, wants to know where that produce was grown and hear more about the family that grew it, they click on a video, and that video is shot on the farm. They get to not only see the farm, they get to meet the family. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about.
Yeah, we learned this lesson the hard way with the giveaway. We didn't have our ducks in a row yet. We didn't have our digital presence. We've talked for years about this is a great way for us to build a brand with a digital presence, as we can connect more with the direct consumer. our customers don't, our processing customers don't really necessarily like that idea for us to bypass them to some degree. But it's a great way for us to be able to connect with that consumer so they can see what our story is and hear and see visually what we are about as a family. And so when our story went global, we were not ready for that, and we didn't have our webpage up and running yet. So we was behind the eight ball. So we learned the hard way.
Yeah, and Ryan, I don't think we had time to talk about this earlier, but what types of of conversations has this created for you in terms of, I know you said a lot of innovators, people are reaching out globally to engage with you, but are there any sort of high level examples you can speak to of connections that you've made in this ecosystem that you think will be beneficial to you moving forward?
Well, a lot of customers have reached out wanting to buy potatoes either directly or indirectly through our customers. So we've been able to make some connections, maybe some big ones. I'm hoping into China, like I mentioned before. Small food processors and that have reached out. We've been able to make some of those connections. It's more difficult than what people imagine when they start to discuss the logistics of that. They're like, well, can you, I want to, like a company from Las Vegas called me, a restaurant, and they're like, hey, can you ship me some potatoes? Okay, well, do you have a heister to unload them? Do you have a storage? Where are you going to put them? How are you going to unload the truck? It's just, there's a lot more technicalities. It's been a challenge, but I think the ones that figure it out, I think they're going to be those innovators that can solve those problems. They're going to be the ones that make it work.
Thank you. I want to transition a bit back to Tracy because we have a few questions around this. I know we also have a lot of vertical growing companies and urban growing companies on the line as well on the producer side. But Tracy, there are some, I know you spoke to it briefly in your sort of intro, but there are questions around the specifics of how you operationally, worked to keep up with demand, given kind of the existing supply chain challenges when it comes to social distancing and people staying at home. So, the questions are around, did you have people working from home, working in rotational shifts? How did you handle that as a company? And maybe you can speak to some of the strategies there.
Yeah, happy to. We have a lot of folks that are working from home remotely that are not business critical to operations. And those folks that are in our fulfillment centers and warehouses, we have vigilant tracking going on. We implemented an emergency leave policy. The precautions we're taking and cleaning standards have ramped up quickly right at the start of the pandemic. We have daily and weekly disinfecting routines, PPE sent to all locations. We get emails, Slack messages every day in regards to how our warehouses are doing and handling social distancing, the space that they've had to create by, moving desks further apart, breaking up the pack lines, the prep lines, all of it. And it's been intense. And part of the reason why we have so many customers on the wait list.
Would like to switch gears a little bit to get an answer from all of you on this. So the question, we've had this on a few of our webinars, which I like putting forward. So it's this idea of never waste a good crisis. That was sort of the segue that caught our eyes. But the idea to get your thoughts on, and I think we've touched on it a little bit here today, is can we acknowledge that like efforts to digitize supply chains were, sort of underway before COVID hit? Can we all acknowledge that, I guess, is the base question. But then do we think that this has really just accelerated those efforts, this crisis, and really pushed us to need to examine produce supply chains and the resiliency for the future? Roland, I think I would start with you and maybe Ilanit as well.
A lot of the push that our participant may be thinking about, like first thing I thought of was blockchain, right? We know that there was an initiative to really begin to implement blockchain into the fresh produce system. But most of that push centered around food safety, right? So that was really the match that lit that fire. So I'm not sure. Look, there are ways that digitization can make supply chains, whether it's produce or anything else, more efficient, more economically efficient. But just keep that in mind, that the big push in digitization, at least over the last, say, 18 to 24 months, was really focused around food safety. And so far, COVID hasn't been linked to any food contamination. So kind of two separate deals.
We have a question specifically for you, Ilanit, on the challenges that Dole is facing, specifically, I think, sort of high level but succinctly when it comes to COVID. How the question is around how is Dole reacting to demand forecasting difficulties? I know we heard that from Ryan, and we heard sort of his 20% cut, and that's sort of his plan based on the information that he has. But Ilanit, can you tell us a little bit more about how Dole is handling those forecasting difficulties?
It's not easy, definitely, but it also linked to the question before about digitizing supply chain. So this situation about demand forecasting, about what's happening in the supply chain with issues in the farms, issues with retailers across the end-to-end supply chain is really pushed us to look at ways to digitize our supply chain. And if I look in a broader view, also what's happening in the startup area where I'm deeply involved for the past decade, and I do see lots of new initiatives around digitizing supply chain in order to cope with those issues, both demand focusing, but others. So when I at the beginning of my speech, I started to put a list of potential technologies that are coming into this area, and it starts with the farm, with precision agriculture, and then it goes to yield prediction, and then to farm management and post-harvest technologies and quality control and inventory management. If that's not enough, here comes more. Cold chain monitoring, freight management, transportation tracking. There's a lot that is coming in. Many technologies, many startups which are operating in this field, and which can help us at the end get more and more data to be able to forecast better and also to be more efficient and so on. But looking also at the challenges from an industry point of view, from a Dole point of view, then there's lots of challenges. Roland just mentioned blockchain. The blockchain is one of the most difficult technologies to apply. It's very cumbersome. It works only if you have contract tracing, and if you apply it to one crop, you just lay down for 2 years because it's too difficult to apply. And if you look just at the list of technologies which I just mentioned, the question would be where to start with them. Whether should I start with quality control, with yield prediction, or should I go to inventory management? So this is part. So the whole area, yes, the trend is up definitely. More startups definitely, and there is a need. But then when it comes into implementation, there's a whole set of challenges to make it right. And to summarize it, yes, there's a whole new room, which is going to help us as an industry and also as Dole to improve.
Great, thank you. And this is a question that we've actually received from a few people now. There's more coming in, but it's this idea of farm to consumer. So Roland and Tracy, I think you can speak to this, and Ryan, I think you spoke to the challenge of trying to all of a sudden shift to the consumer model in the beginning, or direct to consumer model in the beginning, even though it was through donations. There was a lot of at least early stage startups that have been trying to kind of create the Uber for farmer produce delivery in the past, and there's been challenges with those models. But do you think, I think Roland, Tracy, jump in, do you think that there will be more opportunities around, I guess one questioner is calling it F2C? Do you think that this is going to be proliferated by the crisis, and do you think it will have challenges scaling?
The short answer is yes. We've already seen that, right? Ryan described some of that earlier, just in one specific example, right? In his case. So yeah, I think this hastens a trend that had already started a little bit, right? Maybe I think of a CSA, community supported agriculture, for example, where you have this farmer direct to consumer model. But again, the big challenges are around the agronomic side, beyond the economic side, the agronomic side, and that is that it's just nearly impossible to grow certain crops in certain areas at certain times of the year. So that creates a big challenge for these things to really scale and really be able to supply a consumer's year-round produce demand. Right? Yes, they may be able to supply some seasonal products, and those seasonal products will change. But overall produce demand for a consumer, it's tough to get the diversity, especially for 52 weeks a year. If you're just looking local.
Yeah, and I would say you need a robust logistics team to handle that, to work directly with farmers. And we are sourcing regionally as much as possible, and it shifts throughout the year. And so we're trucking when we need to from California to the Midwest, but our regional program simply shifts throughout the year, and we have a dedicated transportation team, and we are having to add to that team right now to manage this incredible shift in demand. That's certainly a layer of complexity, but I do think it's here to stay, and our business has been growing significantly year over year, and with this, the customers are realizing the convenience factor, and direct from farms through our warehouses, packed, portioned to the customer spec and delivered to their front door.
Tracy, sort of leading off of what you just said, we got a few questions around this ahead of time, and a few more questions that have just come in, but really around sort of how existing supply chains lead to monoculture. And if you can, I know you mentioned it a little bit in your intro, but if you can speak to how Imperfect is working to diversify supply chains and to work with farmers who are not farming in that way. If you could speak to that.
Yeah. I mean, it's a simple answer. I mean, we make a concerted effort to partner with growers who are rotating their crops in the ground that handle anywhere from 5 to 15 different commodities and that complement each other. And so that's incredibly important to us. And we recognize how tough it is for, wheat farmers, corn, soybean, all of that. But our strategy is to partner with those growers who are more diverse with their commodities.
One last thing to just jump in from everyone before I know Tor's yelling at me to get done to finish this Q&A, but we did have a question around the future. It'll be very quick. It'll be a last soundbite from you guys, and it's really switching it over to the consumer, which we've spent some time talking about, but actually not too much. It was the idea of like the current retail experience is very much based around being able to touch something and try something and know that the food that you're going to grab in the store is what that you feel good about consuming it. Do you think that sort of reality of what the retail experience looks like is going to shift? And if so, how do you think that shift, what do you think it will look like? Everyone here may have a different answer to that question before we wrap things up.
If you don't mind, I'll chime in here. I think it's a matter of getting the consumer to trust that you will deliver quality products to their door. It's a lot, to ask for someone to trust you to pick out, especially produce. But as they test you out, as they are happy with their experience, the more they trust you as a retailer.
Yeah, no, that's spot on. There's a generational difference as well. I don't tend to trust anybody to pick out my produce. That's partially a generational thing. I think the younger generations are much more willing to let somebody else do it because they don't consider themselves experts on it. But like Tracy said, when it comes to fresh produce, sight unseen, you have to get it right. You pretty much have to get it perfect every time, or it may be a while before they come back to you.
And Ryan, do you have one last thought on that as the farmer at the beginning of our supply chain?
Well, I would say we're going to learn two things from this whole supply chain COVID thing. Is we're going to learn where our vulnerabilities are, and we're going to learn what our priorities are. And people's priorities will change because of this, and I don't know what that looks like yet, but I'm sure that they're going to change to some degree.
Fantastic. I really appreciate that. Ilanit, any last words? You're the last one we haven't heard from.
Well, I do agree with my colleagues here, but I would add also the need for contactless delivery and safety around the fresh produce, and also authenticity of the farmers. Those values which are catered for the younger generations are highly important. Adding to that also, as I mentioned before, the contactless is a post-COVID situation. So we do see a shift.
But thank you everyone for joining. I believe we had over 200 attendees throughout the session today, so thank you. I would especially like to extend a huge thank you to our speakers, Ryan Craney from Craney Farms, Tracy Harden from Imperfect Foods, Ilanit Kabessa from Dole Packaged Foods, and Roland Fumasi from Rabobank. We hope you come away with some key learnings and around the produce supply chain challenges that we're facing as an industry at this time. I'm glad to see so many questions and interactions from the audience. Just a reminder, we will do a recap, and this webinar will be is recorded, so it will be available to you on our website at foodbytesworld.com in the coming days. A call out to our community: if you're an investor or a corporate and would like to be involved in the FoodBytes platform, please reach out to foodbytes@rabobank.com. Or if you're a startup, as Sonia touched on, please fill out that interest form and keep up to date with all things happening at FoodBytes. What is next from us? We have our next webinar on May 20th, Wednesday, May 20th, around funding startups in the current market. So watch this space for some more information around that. Thank you again for joining. This concludes our webinar. Please fill out the survey at the end, and we look forward to speaking with you all in a couple of weeks. Bye.